The AA manifesto calls for change on graduated licenses. Smart motorways and EVs, I'll get into that later, but this is the main story. Graduated licenses. What do they mean by that? Well, basically what they're saying is that when people who pass their tests when they're young, they should not be allowed to carry other young people in their car until they've had 6 months of driving experience. What do you think about that? Well, let me tell you what I think about that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Right, so I'm just going to go through the press release that the AA put out yesterday. And I guess this was particularly timely in a very unfortunate and tragic sense in the fact that yesterday, or I think it was the day before, I think it was on the weekend, there was a massive crash, not far from here actually, Brent Cross Staples Corner. And 3 young guys sadly, very tragically lost their lives in that accident. And of course there were 3 young people. So I guess that kind of took on a particular significance in terms of topicality. But we do have to kind of, pull ourselves away from the emotion of these things to really comprehend what they're about and whether or not they're the right things for us, for society, for the future. Looking at this research from the AA, I gotta say, AA and RAC, most of the time I tend to agree with the sort of stuff they come out. They always are in the best interest of motorists. But every now and then I think we can disagree. So they published this ahead of the local mayoral elections, quite deliberately, it seems. Creating Confidence for Drivers Manifesto. This is from the AA. AA research shows that many drivers are confused and concerned across a range of issues, including being unsure about how and when to make the shift to electric vehicles. That's a biggie. And worried about the state of our roads and infrastructure, as well as the affordability and safety of driving overall. Affordability is a massive thing. Safety, I'll come back to that. Affordability right now is just off the scale. Just the insurance, the running costs, the taxes that are on the car, the cost of fuel, which are going up again. It is actually quite bonkers. So yeah, none of that really helps, does it? So they did a survey. 96% of AA members say that road maintenance is a top transport issue. No kidding. Look at the potholes around here. I mean, to be fair, it has been raining constantly. I think, since late last year. This is a rare time when it's actually not raining. And I think that is what has actually really, really ripped and shredded the tarmac up. I don't really subscribe to the idea that, it's because there's lots of EVs out there and the cars are getting heavier and stuff like that. As I've said in the previous video, HGVs are the most heaviest things out there. And that's proven by the fact that when you drive on the motorway and you drive in the left lane, you can feel the damage that they've done to that road, or that lane rather, because of their weight. So I don't think the cars are to blame for this. I think it's just, poor road maintenance, as they say. So that's the top transport. It certainly is, because the amount of damage that causes, and the thing is, not only is the potential damage that it causes to your car, but the fact that you find yourself instinctively swerving to avoid these potholes. Particularly when I'm driving my classic E30, and getting hold of those alloy wheels, the BBS rims that are on that car is not only expensive but very difficult, because there aren't that many around, and there's specific sizes and everything like that. So yeah, you really have to protect them. I've got 2 dead ones already, which are just like plant pots in my balcony now. Anyway, back to this. 8 in 10, that's 81%, want smart motorways scrapped. Yeah, smart motorways. I don't know who thought of that idea. Let's get rid of the hard shoulder and turn that into a lane. And then people won't realize that somebody had a problem and pulled over. They had a burst tire or engine failure, and they pulled over, and then a lorry comes and drives into them. I mean, I don't know whose idea that was. That just didn't seem like a very good idea. So yeah, I agree with that. Almost 3/4, 72%. That's surprising me. Almost 3/4, 72%. I guess it's all down to demographics of these things, right? They think that the graduated license limiting passengers is a good idea. Again, when I refer to demographics, I get a lot of the AA members, the sort of people that are smart enough to take out AA membership, a little bit older, a little bit senior, sensible, you know. So, you know, I suppose that kind of why it's as high as that 72%. People like myself, really, but the report shows drivers' views that the cost and complexity of driving has increased. I'm just carrying on. More than 2/3, 69% think that motoring taxes will increase. Well, hey, they certainly will, and especially this thing. Interesting, they put it, out ahead of the mayoral elections in London. We can talk a little bit about that, but the fact is that, if we get another Labour mayor, well, the same Labour mayor continues again, unprecedented third term. On top of that, we will get a Labour government, which is looking highly likely by the end of this year. You can be almost certain that the motorist is going to be battered and battered and battered into submission. Literally getting to the point where we're forcing to relinquish our cars, which a lot of people are already doing. There's a very high percentage of motorists now considering abandoning driving altogether because the cost is just too high. And because there's so little incentivization, which some of you may think, oh, that's a good thing. But on the other hand, I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head, but I can put some stats up about how much the car industry is worth to the UK economy and how important it is. Got to keep these things in mind, and on a global level as well. But anyway, let's get back to this. 65% want better EV infrastructure. So people are saying, okay, you want us to swap to EVs, then give us better EV infrastructure. There's something very interesting about EVs. Particularly because, like I said, I'm going to discuss this because they've said that this is released ahead of the mayoral elections in London. And they're talking about EV infrastructure. And there's something very interesting that I think that not a lot of people actually realize. Now, currently in London, we have ULEZ charge, ultra low emission zone, the biggest low emission zone in a city anywhere in the world. And we have the congestion charging. Congestion charging is in central London, quite central London, but still it's there. And currently, the situation is that you don't pay ULEZ if you have an EV, and you don't pay congestion charging if you have an EV. ULEZ is 24/7, it's all the time, apart from Christmas Day. And the congestion charging is 7 days a week, but there's times, I think 7 a.m. to 10 p.m, maybe something like that. It's £15 charge for that, £12.50 charge, daily charge for the ULEZ. Now, electric cars, if you register the electric car with TfL for London, then it's exempt. There is a low vehicle emissions discount. I think that's what they call it. And what that means is that basically it's 100% discount for EVs. So basically, if you have an EV, you can drive into London. And if you live in London, own an EV, because that's the best way to get around. So again, for a lot of people, like, okay, that may be an incentive to get into an EV, to get into an electric car, because congestion charging is zero. Yes, but aside from the fact that there's going to be a form of road tax, a VED as they call it now, that's going to be introduced to electric cars in 2025. In addition to that, after 25th of December 2025, so 25th of December itself, of course, being a free day anyway, but after 25th of December, the clean vehicle discount in London will be discontinued. It'll be no more. So if you have an electric car, you will then suddenly be subject to that £15 daily charge. I don't know if a lot of people know this. So basically, from the end of 2025 onwards, electric cars will also have to pay a daily £15 charge to drive in the congestion charging zone in central London. So that's a reality of how it is. There is, I believe, not for ULEZ, but for congestion charging, a residence discount scheme. I think it's as high as 90%. But you have to meet the eligibility criteria, etc., in order to get that. So if you have an EV, or if you're thinking of getting one, you should look into that straight away. Even if you think you don't need it, you soon will. Because 2025, I mean, we're in 2024. We're coming up to quarter way 2024. Time flies, We'll be there in no time. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because I think that a lot of people, because it's one of the things that you kind of forget and you don't realize until it will suddenly creep up onto you. And another reason why think, well, where are the incentivization to get people to move to EVs, which they seem to want us to do, because they say, well, EVs, especially to be fair, in the cities, EVs are the better option because there are zero tailpipe emissions. So there's less NOS, nitrogen dioxide, and so that actually is a good thing. So surely it should be encouraged. But all the subsidies have been removed. Now they're talking about removing the zero tax, zero road tax, VED, whatever you want to call it. Well, officially it's VED. And now then they're going to hit you with a congestion charge. You know, because like if you lived in central London, if you're one of the fortunate few that do, not many people actually, to be fair, live in central London, but if you do, or if you're somebody that has to regularly drive into central London because of business or work, and you were thinking, well, I got an EV, so I'll be fine. You won't be. Keep that in mind. Let's return back to this AA thing. The AA has spotlighted drivers that make a significant contribution to the public purse, as well as play a major part in the transition to net zero. Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, all part of what we're doing, right? It's merging, and it says it's vital that their voice is heard by all political parties. I mean, certainly I think the AA and the RSC could probably do a bit more in that context. The sustainable future, they make this point, I've just said actually, providing the right incentives, infrastructure, and information to support the switch to zero-emission vehicles. For example, helping those without on-street parking by cutting VAT for on-street EV charging. So this is the other thing, because home charging for EVs is much, much cheaper than public charging, which is much more expensive because there's VAT on it. Hey, are you liking this video? Then make sure that you hit the like button. That's really important. Also, tell everybody. The rest of it talks about, you know, safer roads, smoother journeys. So that's addressing the pothole crisis, ring fence funds, and the use of technology for more permanent repairs. That's the other thing. You know, even when they do get round to repairing the potholes, the repairs are crap. There's a road near here, which I frequently use. It's near Friant Park. And there's one particular pothole just on a crossing there that just every few weeks is there. And I see them there repairing it, but then it's there again. And you just think, that, why don't you fix this properly? What is the problem here? Safer roads they talk about. So this is where they talk about actually potholes, make the potholes, fix the potholes, that'll make the road safer. But anyway, so what they're talking about here is reducing road deaths through setting clear targets, increase road policing, addressing the tragedy of new drivers' deaths through graduated licenses, such as restricting passengers for 6 months after passing their test. So in the final few minutes, I just want to talk about this a little bit because, you know, when I was young, when I got my driving license, I got it straight away. You know, I was like, it was like my number one target in life, you know. But I was a car guy. I got it because I wanted it, because I wanted to drive, because, you know, I was desperate to drive. Love cars, always loved cars. Couldn't wait to have my own car. Couldn't wait to get my driving license. So for me, that was the number one priority. But of course, you know, the happy benefit of something like that is that when you're young and, you know, you're at college or whatever, then college, university, whatever, and you get a driving license, then also you kind of become Mr. Popular because you're the guy with the driving license. And of course, the other thing is I don't drink as well, so you know that in a sense can also make you popular. So for a lot of young people, this is actually a key incentive to actually get their driving license. Of course, if they got through that stage in later life, the key incentive to get a driving license is probably because of work. You know, because you know they need it because they need, you know, they're missing out on job opportunities or work opportunities. But at that point in life, at that 17 age, you know, and of course, here's the other thing. Although to be fair, my kids haven't learned yet, but I got my license at 17, and I think that people should. The earlier the better, because you build up that experience. You build up that well of experience, that well of, you know, just there's nothing that substitutes actual real world on-road experience, no matter how much instruction and training you get. So, which is important, but you know, so I feel that people should do it when they're young, and also when they're young, you know, they're easier to adapt to driving. They're more alert, they're sharper, and I think that, you know, I think younger drivers are much maligned unnecessarily because just the awareness, you know, and also like with modern cars, we have so much tech in them, you know, all the infotainment systems and a lot of, you know, now the Euro NCAP, the European Crash Safety Test people have said that you know, future cars won't get full 5-star ratings unless they introduce buttons back into their cars, because all of these screens are making things very, very difficult. And especially like, when you're a bit older, then it's all very confusing and stuff like that, with all that sort of, smartphone, tablet type technology there that, can confound people. So, so with younger people, that's not an issue because they've grown up with that stuff, so they're much attuned, much sharper, much more keenly attuned to that technology, and then they can put that aside. They know how to deal with that, and they can focus on the driving as well. So so I think it's a little bit unfair. But yes, there is the aspect that when you're younger, you got your license, you want to go out, you want to show off, There is that argument, but at the same time, I think that's a big problem because I don't think you can blanket do such a thing. How would you police such a thing? How would you know that the young person is with another young person and that they don't have a license for more than 6 months? I mean, at the end of the day, for example, like my son, if he gets a driving license, then I would like him to be in a position to be able to give his sister a lift, especially if it's late at night or something like that, and she needs to go somewhere or needs to come back from uni or something like that. Then I would want him to be in a position to be able to go and do that rather than me having to go do that. And I know that he'd be careful because he'd had his sister in the car. But how would you be able to police that? How would you know that that's the case? So I think that it's just a can of worms. And the thing is, like, rather than, that's the other thing with society right now, because we just ban everything. We just say, this is dangerous for you, so we're going to ban it, and this is bad for you, so we're going to ban it. And just at the moment, we're watching the news today, and it's all about the smoking argument that's happening today because Rishi Sunak wants to ban smoking. I've never smoked. I don't smoke. I don't like smoking. I don't agree with it. I've always discouraged it. Very early on, back in Saudi, when I was, like I said, when I was driving and I had friends in the car, I remember taking one friend's newly acquired packet of cigarettes and checking them out the window because he was about to light up in my car, and I was like, no, you're not doing that. So he was not well pleased. So I'm not a pro smoker. I don't smoke. Like I said, I don't drink. I don't smoke. But at the same time, I defend their right to do it. At the end of the day, it's so much better now than it was when I was growing up. I mean, I remember the first time I started working in a newspaper. I remember my first editor. It's quite funny because my first editor, he would write supplements, weekly supplements about, the dangers of smoking. And if you went into his office, it would be hard to see him because there would be so much smoke in his office because he was like a chain smoker, as a lot of journalists and editors were back in the day, right? And so this is an era where we still smoked indoors, smoked indoors in restaurants and pubs and buses and stuff like that, where passive smoking, getting ill through passive smoking was a big thing. All of that is gone now. That's the other thing. It's like we keep trying to fix things that we've already fixed, Cars are much safer now. The technology on cars, the automatic braking, the ADAS systems, or driver assisted systems, the braking is so much better. The handling is so much better. The response, we've got ABS systems, we've got traction control systems, It's so much, but we keep trying to fix things. Again, same goes with the emissions. The emissions on the cars now are so much. Another point of fact is we keep talking about emissions from the tailpipe. Since 2013, emissions have fallen off dramatically. They become less than the emissions that you get from the brakes and the tires on the car. Tailpipe emissions account for 15% on a nice car compared to what you're getting out of the brake and the tires in terms of particulate emissions. These are problems we've already fixed. We're still trying to fix them. And it's like, no, shouldn't we move on? Shouldn't we look at maybe crime? That's a big problem. Should we look at stabbings? Shouldn't we look at stuff like that? Shouldn't we look at financial fraud? People being done out of their money? What are you gonna stop in terms of, this is dangerous for people? What are you gonna stop? Eventually you're just gonna tell people sit at home and do nothing because if you go outside, it's too dangerous for you. So we banned you from going outside. So you sit at home and you just die watching the TV because you got a heart attack from eating too many pizzas that you've ordered. I mean, where does it end? So at the end of the day, I think this all has to be balanced a little bit. And I think sometimes we kind of lose sight of the balance. And maybe the intentions are good. Maybe in our efforts to do good things and good intentions, we're going to end up castrating society. I think that's the danger. And I think especially with things like, somebody gets his driving license. Oh yes, but you can drive. You've got a license now. You can drive. We've qualified you to drive. But actually we haven't. So why did you pass the test in the first place? Another thing I would like to talk about, cars. Cars in general, this is a big an issue. And this is more to do with the car industry. But when I was younger, you got into cars, there were limits on the handling abilities of cars. And those limits became apparent very quickly. That's not to say that when we were young, we didn't get into trouble and stuff like that. Of course, a lot of people did. But you could feel more of the car. Through the steering, you could feel the car. You knew that the tires weren't that great. Most of the tires were much skinnier than they are today. And so the handling and stuff wasn't as good. So you knew what the limits were. So you'd be like, no, stay within the limit, because you can feel it. You can feel as you approach the limit. You feel like, oh, this is getting a bit dangerous. Trouble with modern cars is that they're so good, and all the electronic systems keeps you so isolated from what's actually happening, is that you don't know that you've gone too far until it's too late. And I think that's probably one of the things that's catching out inexperienced drivers nowadays, is that they are not compensating enough for the fact that they don't quite understand where the lack of ability of the car begins and overlaps with their own lack of skills and experience. And this is something like with older cars you could explore, because there was that delicate balance of, okay, this is how far you can push the throttle, this is how far you can corner, this is how much grip you've got. A lot of that you can't feel anymore. It's all electronic systems. So I think this is another issue. But anyway, in some sense, that's always been the case. And, the reality is that when you're younger, you're confident, you always want to push things, you always want to prove a point. And unfortunately, that's the inevitability of some of these things. You got to keep in mind that anything could happen to you anytime, anywhere. So there's only so much you can do. I mean, absolutely, you should be as safe as possible. You should look after your health, your benefit, look after any way that you can benefit yourself in terms of your longevity and your health and your safety. But ultimately, sometimes it's in the hands of God, isn't it? So yeah, anyway, so there you go. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. And more rants to come, I suppose. Check this out, guys. It's my book. It's my first novel, and it's written for car fans like you. It's a fun political action thriller. It's full of cool cars and spectacular action. Get your copy now at Amazon.com.